Some Aussie cattle stations are bigger than countries. Anna Creek alone is larger than Belgium. But how do you run cattle across millions of hectares? How do you keep stock alive through floods and droughts? And how did these places grow into the biggest stations on Earth? Stick around as we count down the top 20. And don't forget to subscribe to Spinifex Stations for more stories from the Outback. At number 20 is Mount Freeling Station in the far north of South Australia near Lyndhurst. 1,002,000 hectares, 10,020 square kilometres. Mount Freeling covers about 1 million hectares of arid rangeland, making it one of the largest pastoral leases in the country. This station runs livestock on hardy gibbered desert country, with operations historically focused on sheep and now predominantly cattle due to changing conditions and wild dog pressure. Despite its remote location and harsh environment, Mount Freeling has thrived by employing waterbores and prudent land management to utilise scant rainfall. Little is publicly documented about Mount Freeling's early history, but its sheer size and survival in such tough country is an achievement in itself. Today, it remains a massive outback holding, contributing to Australia's pastoral industry by turning off fattened stock from country many would deem inhospitable. 19. Rawlinna Station in Western Australia, 1,011,714 hectares, or 10,117 square kilometres, a very large sheep station. Rawlinna sprawls across just over 1 million hectares on the Nullarbor Plain, about 400 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie. For decades, Rawlinna was owned by Jumbuck Pastoral and ran huge flocks of merino sheep, around 60,000 to 65,000 sheep on average, producing fine wool on its vast semi-arid plains. Established in 1962, Rawlinna grew into one of the world's largest working sheep stations. A notable challenge here is predator control. Extensive fencing and wild dog management have been key to sustaining the wool enterprise. In recent years, Rawlinna drew interest from major pastoral and investment groups. The station's legacy as a wool powerhouse endures. Its sheer scale and the fact it once ran tens of thousands of sheep on the treeless Nullarbor Plain is a testament to Australian pastoral ingenuity. Coming in at number 18 is Tanbar Station, 1,021,904 hectares, 10,219 square kilometres, covering just over 1 million hectares in Queensland's Channel Country. Tanbar lies southwest of Windora and even includes an outstation, Mount Howard, as part of its operations. The Cooper Creek flows through Tanbar, meaning large portions of this station are lush floodplains during good seasons. These richly grassed swamps allow Tanbar to fatten cattle on natural pasture when the Channel Country floods, producing top-quality beef in the boom times. Now owned by Paraway Pastoral, Tanbar is run primarily as a breeding and growing property for beef cattle. It carries many thousands of cattle, exact numbers vary with seasons, and is known for turning off well-finished stock after big floods. Historically, Tanbar was part of Sir Sidney Kidman's legendary holdings in the early 20th century. By 1931, it spanned about 7,770 square kilometres. Subsequent expansions, like adding Mount Howard, have boosted it above 10,000 square kilometres today. Managing floods and droughts is the story of Tanbar. In wet years, it's a grass paradise. In dry years, a dusty challenge. Its achievement is harnessing the extreme boom and bust cycles of the Channel Country to reliably produce beef cattle. At number 17, we have Headingley Station on the Georgina River in far western Queensland. 1,030,200 hectares, that's 10,032 square kilometres. Headingley spans just over 1 million hectares of prime black soil downs country in the Gulf region. It's capable of running roughly 40,000 head of cattle, predominantly Santa Gertrudis breeds well suited to the climate. In fact, Headingley is composed of 3 contiguous leases: Headingley, Walgra and Carandotta, that operate as one giant entity. Now owned by the Australian Agricultural Company, it serves as a major breeding station, even contributing cattle to AACO's Wagyu crossbreeding program for premium beef. The station's fertile Mitchell and Flinders grass plains, nourished by seasonal floods of the Georgina, make for excellent fattening country. Historically, Sydney Kidman owned Headingley in the early 1900s, and it went through periods of sheep grazing and even abandonment during hard times. But by the mid-20th century, Headingley was a cornerstone of cattle production in the region. Its success lies in the abundant natural pasture and water. In good seasons, there's ample feed, and the station turns off thousands of quality cattle. Scale and productivity define Headingley. 1 million hectares of grassland supporting tens of thousands of cattle, quietly supplying beef to Australian and export markets year after year.
Newcastle Waters Station in the Northern Territory is number 16, 1,033,101 hectares, or 10,353 square kilometres. Newcastle Waters Station in the Northern Territory is situated at the historic junction of 3 major stock routes. This station is famous as a meeting point for drovers in the old days. Today, Newcastle Waters runs about 45,000 head on its well-watered Barkly Tableland plains. It includes around 20,000 breeding cows, mostly Brahmins, and turns off some 13,000 cattle annually, many exported live to Indonesia. The land here is excellent grazing country, open grass plains and floodplains that benefit from monsoonal rains. Back in the 1880s, the station was established by Dr. W. J. Brown and later owned for 50 years by the legendary Sir John Lewis and family. In the 20th century, it was owned by media mogul Kerry Packer, who even sent his son James to Jackaroo here. The old Newcastle Waters Township now stands as a ghost town, a relic of the time when cattle droving was king. Under current owner Consolidated Pastoral Company, CPC, Newcastle Waters is a modern operation with extensive water infrastructure and paddocks. Its big achievement is marrying that rich history with high productivity. It's one of the most productive cattle stations in Australia, capitalising on the rich Mitchell grass to raise tens of thousands of export quality cattle each year.
Ranking 15th is Andado Station, a vast 10,850 square kilometre cattle station in the Simpson Desert region of the Northern Territory. Andado is the easternmost homestead before the Simpsons' endless dunes, truly remote country. The station's landscape is unique. Red sand dunes, spinifex plains, gibber flats and even occasional swamps among the dunes that fill after rare rains. Despite the harsh desert environment, Andado carries cattle, usually a few thousand head depending on seasonal conditions, that graze on hardy native pastures and browse. Historically, Andado was run by the legendary Molly Clark, who preserved the original 1920s Old Andado homestead as a museum to outback life. The station lease itself dates back to 1880 and notably includes the Mac Clark Conservation Reserve, protecting a stand of the rare acacia poos, waddywood trees found only in this region. Today, Andado is owned by Crown Point Pastoral, who acquired it as part of an organic beef venture. It remains extremely isolated. The homestead is roughly 240 kilometres southeast of Alice Springs, near the NT-SA border. Andado's achievement is in its adaptation to desert ranching, using artesian bores for water and careful stocking rates to protect the fragile land. It's a station where camels and brumbies roam alongside cattle and where the sheer remoteness and natural beauty leave a lasting impression on anyone who visits. Macumba Station is at number 14, covers approximately 11,063 square kilometres in northern South Australia. Located northeast of Oodnadatta, Macumba occupies a mix of sandhill country, stony gibber plains and flood-out creek systems in the Lake Eyre Basin. Several creeks, including the Macumba and the Alberga, traverse the property, creating waterholes that sustain cattle during dry times. Macumba's history is rich. The station goes back to the 1880s and was once owned by Sydney Kidman, the Cattle King, who bought it in 1905. Under Kidman, Macumba was known as one of the best watered stations of the north by 1917, thanks to new artesian bores that yielded tremendous water flows. The station has seen wild floods and bitter droughts. In 1892-93, a drought killed an estimated 1,000 head of cattle when every waterhole dried up, while in 1908, big floods swamped the land after heavy rains. For most of the 20th century, Macumba was part of S. Kidman & Co.'s empire. In 2016, it was sold to Australian Outback Beef as part of the Kidman Station sale. Currently, Macumba runs cattle, having transitioned fully from sheep long ago due to dingoes, and benefits from those reliable bores and seasonal creek flows. Its achievement? Enduring the boom and bust climate of the outback for over a century. Macumba's large area and diverse terrain allow it to carry a self-replacing herd of cattle that can be shifted to find feed and water even in tough times, exemplifying resilience in pastoral operations. At number 13 is the Narwietooma Aggregation, about 11,000 square kilometres of cattle country west of Alice Springs in the Northern Territory. This is not a single traditional station, but a group of 4 pastoral properties, including Narwietooma Station, Glen Helen, Derwent and the Innamincka lease, now operated together. In recent years, a Queensland-based company backed by international investment purchased these properties. The combined holding covers rugged Central Australian terrain, from the scrubby foothills near the West Macdonnell Ranges around Glen Helen Gorge to the sandy Spinifex Plains further west. This aggregation is managed as part of an organic beef enterprise, supplying grass-fed beef with organic certification. The total herd across Narwietooma and its sister properties is large. Exact numbers aren't public, but several tens of thousands of cattle are likely spread over the entire 1.1 million hectares. Historically, Narwietooma Station itself dates back to the early 1900s. The sale marked another chapter of consolidation in the industry. Notably, parts of this aggregation border or include areas of high conservation value. For instance, Glen Helen is known for tourism and natural springs. The Narwietooma aggregation's significance lies in new models of pastoral investment. It highlights how outside capital and organic practices are shaping the future of outback stations. By uniting multiple leases under one operation, it achieves economies of scale and the ability to rotate cattle across diverse landscapes, from sandy deserts to riverine flats. Clocking in at number 12 is Quinyambie Station, an expansive 12,065 square kilometres leased straddling the South Australia-New South Wales border northwest of Broken Hill. Quinyambie is an extremely arid outback country, part of the Strzelecki Desert Channel Country interface. Despite the harsh climate, Quinyambie runs about 9,000 head of cattle with a small crew of just 4 staff. That low stocking rate, roughly 1 beast per 133 hectares, reflects the sparse vegetation and erratic rainfall. Historically, Quinyambie was a sheep station and later became part of S. Kidman & Co.'s portfolio. In 2010, it was bought by the Matoru Pastoral Company, a local family outfit from Kidman. The station's name is derived from Aboriginal language and, like many properties in this corner, it likely started as a sheep run in the 19th century until advancing desertification and dingo pressure prompted a switch to cattle. Quinyambie's terrain includes dune fields, gibber plains and ephemeral watercourses that flow toward Lake Frome. A notable feature is that a large portion of Quinyambie's northeast lies within the dog-proof fence. It directly adjoins dog fence country, which has helped it maintain cattle production. South of the fence is sheep country. The challenge and achievement of Quinyambie is making a viable cattle operation on land that averages well under 200 millimetres of rain annually. With careful water management, bores and pipelines, and conservative stocking, Quinyambie continues to turn off organic certified cattle that are tough, healthy and well suited to the environment. It stands as one of the largest family-owned stations in Australia, proof that even in the most remote corner, local pastoral families are keeping the tradition alive. Western Australia's De Grey Station comes in at number 11 with about 1.214 million hectares of Pilbara rangeland. De Grey holds a special place in history. It was the earliest pastoral lease in WA, first taken up in 1862. Located east of Port Hedland at the mouth of the De Grey River, this station initially ran sheep and was famed for its wool. By 1886, De Grey grew to nearly 3 million acres, around 1.214 million hectares, and was stocked with tens of thousands of sheep. It had 16 paddocks, fenced by 322 kilometres of six-wire sheep fence, a remarkable feat for the 1880s. The station even provided wool for British Army uniforms in World War I. In 1914, its owners supplied wool for the British Expeditionary Forces uniforms. De Grey transitioned to cattle in the 1970s as wool prices fell and wild dog attacks made sheep raising difficult. Today, it's owned and operated by the Bettini family, who run several Pilbara cattle stations. De Grey now runs a herd of around 6,000 cattle, predominantly Brahman cross, on its mix of coastal grasslands and inland acacia scrub, a modest herd size reflective of the Pilbara's lower carrying capacity. The station sits in cyclone country and has weathered ferocious storms, such as a cyclone in 1889 that destroyed buildings and fences and killed 1,300 sheep. Despite challenges, De Grey's achievements are many. It spearheaded pastoralism in northwest Australia, implemented large-scale water storage and fencing very early on, and survived the swings of fortune in wool and beef. It remains one of Australia's biggest stations by area and one of WA's most historic pastoral properties, symbolising the grit and adaptation required to ranch in the Pilbara for over 150 years. Cracking the top 10 is Brunette Downs Station in the Northern Territory, a crown jewel of the Barkly tableland. Brunette Downs spans about 12,212 square kilometres, or 1,221,200 hectares of prime grass country. It is owned by the Australian Agricultural Company, AAC, and is one of the most prodigious cattle stations in the nation. Brunette has a carrying capacity of around 110,000 head of cattle, yes, 110,000, and typically runs a mixed herd of Brahman, Santa Gertrudis and a Barkly composite breed. In a good year, this station can turn off 35,000 cattle, often sending steers to AAC's feedlots or live export and retaining a massive breeding herd on the property. With over 50 staff, Brunette functions like a small town. It even hosts the famous Brunette Downs races and camp draft, a big social event in the Barkly. Historically, Brunette Downs was established in the 1880s and passed through a number of hands until AAC acquired it post-World War II. An intriguing historical footnote, Henry Harry Redford, the notorious cattle duffer who inspired the fictional Captain Starlight, drove the first mob of cattle to Brunette in 1884. He then managed the station for a few years, helping open up this country for large-scale grazing. Brunette's terrain includes the expansive Brunette Lake system, seasonal lakes that can cover 20% of the property, providing nutritious herbage when they flood. The station is crisscrossed by the Tablelands Highway and has multiple outstations and an array of bores and dams. As the second largest station in the NT after Alexandria, Brunette Downs is an agricultural powerhouse. Its achievement lies in combining sheer size with high productivity. Few places on earth run so many cattle on one property. Through careful rangeland management and infrastructure, 53 main paddocks averaging 336 square kilometres each, Brunette maintains the health of its land and cattle, keeping that Barclay reputation for quality beef well intact. Wave Hill Station in the Northern Territory ranks number 9, covering about 12,500 square kilometres or 1,250,000 hectares today. Wave Hill is iconic in Australian history. It's situated on the fertile Victoria River District with basalt plains of Mitchell grass and frontage along the Victoria and Camfield rivers. This country can carry tens of thousands of cattle. Indeed, by 1907, Wave Hill was running an estimated 58,000 head of cattle, an astonishing herd size for that era. But Wave Hill is best known as the site of the Wave Hill Walk-Off, the Gurindji Strike. In 1966, Gurindji Aboriginal stockmen and their families, led by Vincent Lingerie, staged a walk-off from Wave Hill to protest poor wages and conditions. The strike lasted 9 years and became a turning point for Indigenous land rights in Australia. In 1975, Prime Minister Gough Whitlam symbolically handed back part of the land to the Gurindji people, a moment etched in history when he poured sand into Lingerie's hand. After that, the station was split, with the Gurindji gaining a portion, Dagaragu, and the remaining section later sold. Today, Wave Hill Station is owned by Western Grazing Company and remains one of the NT's biggest cattle producers, running mostly Brahman and Charbray cattle. It's Western Grazing's flagship with over 12,000 square kilometres still in operation. The land is well watered and productive, making for excellent cattle country. Wave Hill's achievements are twofold, agricultural and social. Agriculturally, it has been a heavyweight producer for over a century. Socially, it was the catalyst for the Aboriginal land rights movement. No other station on this list can claim it changed the course of a nation's history. Today, as large mobs of cattle graze its plains, Wave Hill stands as hallowed ground in the story of the Outback, symbolising both prosperity and justice. At number 8 is Marion Downs Station, occupying about 12,870 square kilometres or 1,287,000 hectares in Queensland's far west. Marion Downs, together with an outstation called Herbert Downs, forms an enormous cattle domain in the Channel Country southwest of Boolyah. The property is watered by the Georgiana River and its tributaries Burke, Hamilton, Mulligan rivers, which create broad floodplains of rich pasture during wet seasons. Marion's land ranges from those productive floodplains and open Mitchell grass downs to drier Gibber and Sandhill country edging the Simpson Desert to the west. Currently owned by the North Australian Pastoral Company, NAPCO, Marion Downs carries around 15,000 head of cattle, largely a Brahman cross herd, with about 15 staff running the operation. It's NAPCO's second largest station and a key part of their breeding program. Historically, Marion Downs was established in 1877 during Queensland's westward pastoral expansion. It changed hands a few times in the 19th century and interestingly was briefly considered good sheep country by some owners. However, cattle proved the better choice. By the 1950s, NAPCO acquired Marion, pairing it with nearby Herbert Downs. One standout feature, Marion Downs is adjacent to the Cannington mine, one of the world's largest silver-lead deposits, showing the diverse land use in the area. But the station itself remains focused on cattle. Flood management is a big part of life here. In big rain years, roughly a quarter of Marion Downs can go underwater, yet that's a boon as it leaves behind nutritious herbage when they flood. In dry years, stock waters become the limiting factor. Marion Downs' achievement is being the second largest station in Queensland and thriving in the Channel Country's extreme environment. By skillfully riding the wet and dry cycles, it sends robust cattle to market and continues the legacy of pastoralism in a region that's as challenging as it is rewarding. Western Australia's Home Valley takes the number 7 spot with around 1,316,400 hectares, or 1,364 square kilometres in the East Kimberley. Home Valley Station, often branded as HV8, is situated along the iconic Gibb River Road, west of Kununurra. Unlike the arid Outback stations in the south, Home Valley is in the lush Kimberley savanna, bounded in part by the Pentecost River and overlooking the majestic Cockburn Range. It's not only a cattle station, but also a tourism destination. Since 2006, Home Valley has operated a wilderness retreat offering accommodation, fishing, horse riding and stunning scenery to travellers. In fact, parts of Baz Luhrmann's film Australia 2008 were filmed here. Home Valley stood in as the fictional Faraway Downs. On the pastoral side, Home Valley runs a herd of Brahman and crossbred cattle, several thousand head, and is owned by the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation, the ILSC. The ILSC purchased Home Valley along with the nearby Karinji and Durack River leases in 1999, returning the land to Indigenous ownership. Combined, these three properties cover about 3.5 million acres, 1.416 million hectares, though Home Valley itself is about 1.316 million hectares. This station provides training and jobs for Indigenous stockmen and hospitality workers, making it a leader in Aboriginal economic development. Historically, Home Valley was established in 1957 during a government push to open more Kimberley land for grazing. It had a rough start. The area was once nicknamed the Underworld due to rampant cattle theft in earlier days. Over time, with investment in fencing and water points, it became a productive pastoral property. An airstrip upgrade in 2005, co-funded by the WA government, even enabled the Royal Flying Doctors Service to access Home Valley at night, a critical service in such a remote locale. Home Valley's achievement is a blend of pastoral productivity, cultural heritage and tourism. It's a place where you might see stockmen mustering cattle at dawn and by afternoon see tourists sipping a cold drink by the Pentecost River. Its sheer size, natural beauty and dual-purpose approach make Home Valley a standout among Australia's biggest stations. At number 6, Innamincka Station covers about 13,552 square kilometres, 1,355,000 hectares in the far northeast of South Australia. Innamincka is just northeast of the tiny Innamincka township on Cooper Creek, a name famous from the ill-fated Burke and Wills expedition. The station itself is steeped in history and legend. Founded in 1872 by Robert Bostock, Innamincka was the first station established along the Cooper Creek, bringing permanent settlement to these channels. By the 1880s, it grew to 15,000 square kilometres and had about 8,000 cattle. In the early 1900s, it became part of Sydney Kidman's cattle empire. Kidman bought Innamincka in 1908. Over the years, the station's size fluctuated as land was sold or resumed. It was once reported at 25,900 square kilometres, perhaps an exaggerated figure. As of recent decades, Innamincka was South Australia's second largest station after Anna Creek at around 13,552 square kilometres. It remained under S. Kidman & Co. for much of the 20th century and into the 21st. Kidman's management, and later that of his successors, turned Innamincka into a robust cattle operation, despite the boom-bust nature of the Cooper country. The Cooper Creek's frequent flooding is a blessing, transforming dry plains into verdant pasture, but equally, droughts here can be devastating. Innamincka also coexists with the oil and gas industry. The Moomba gas fields are nearby, and the station saw some of Australia's first gas wells in the 1960s. In recent years, ownership changed. Today, Innamincka is held by Crown Point Pastoral Company, who run it along with nearby properties. The station carries several thousand head of cattle, often organically managed, and maintains an iconic outback hospitality at the Innamincka Homestead, which welcomes travellers. Innamincka's achievements lie in its rich heritage and adaptation.
It has survived epic floods and droughts. It supported exploration. Burke and Will's tragedy unfolded here in 1861 and then became a hub of the pastoral frontier. Today, as Brahman cross cattle wander among eucalyptus-lined waterholes and pelicans fish in the Cooper Creek, Innamincka Station exemplifies the spirit of the Channel Country. Huge, remote, full of history, and pulsing with life when the floods come. Looking into the top 5, Davenport Downs is Queensland's largest cattle station and Australia's 5th largest overall. Covering some 15,100 square kilometres, 1,510,000 hectares in the Channel Country of Western Queensland, Davenport is massive. It lies in the Diamantina Shire, southeast of Boulia and northeast of Birdsville, straddling the Diamantina River and Farrars Creek. This is classic Channel Country, flat Mitchell grass downs intersected by river channels that flood in the wet season, replenishing rich cracking clay soils. Davenport is so large it includes the adjoining Springvale Station. The two leases run in aggregate. Together they make one superstation owned by Paraway. The combined operation boasts extensive water infrastructure, bores tapping the Great Artesian Basin and natural water holes, and is extremely productive. Davenport can carry on the order of 20 to 25,000 head of cattle comfortably, and in good seasons, even more. The station specialises in breeding and growing beef cattle, often sending younger stock to fattening properties elsewhere once the Channel Country dries off. Historically, Davenport dates back to the late 1860s. It was initially taken up by John Costello. By the early 1900s, it was known to turn off thousands of cattle annually. A 1913 sales advertisement noted Davenport had 20,200 cattle and 340 horses on 8,000 square kilometres at that time. Over the years, Davenport grew by absorbing neighbours. Under Paraway's ownership in the 2000s, it expanded further with Springvale's inclusion. One of Davenport's key achievements is being the largest station in Queensland and remaining a linchpin of the state's cattle industry. Its Channel Country floodplains are a strategic asset. When they flood, a quarter of the station can be a vast lake, but soon that recedes and leaves nutrient-charged pastures that put weight on cattle fast. In 2010, Davenport made news as huge floods turned the entire region into an inland sea visible from space. Yet within months, Paraway had teams mustering some of the fattest cattle imaginable off those same plains. Such is the nature of Davenport Downs, it exemplifies the boom and bust brilliance of Australia's interior. Feast in the good years, survive the lean ones, and over the long run, prosper on a scale few can comprehend.
In 4th place is Lake Nash Station, a colossal cattle property on the Barkly tableland at the Queensland Northern Territory border. Lake Nash operates as one entity with two adjacent leases, Georgina Downs and Aga de Garda, effectively bringing the total area to around 1,600,000 hectares, 16,000 square kilometres. This Barkly behemoth is owned by Georgina Pastoral Company. Thanks to the fertile black soil Mitchell grass plains bisected by the Georgina River, Lake Nash has an impressive carrying capacity, about 55,000 head of cattle in a good season. Approximately 30,000 of those are breeding cows, making Lake Nash one of the largest breeding operations in the country. The station's herd is a mix of Brahman, Santa Gertrudis, Charbray, Senepal and Wagyu cross cattle, reflecting a drive to produce hardy yet high-quality beef. Lake Nash's history goes back to 1879 when it was acquired, unstocked, by John Costello. Costello overlanded 700 cattle to start the herd in 1879. Through booms and busts, including massive floods in 1901 and big droughts, Lake Nash grew. In the mid-20th century, it was owned by the Scottish-Australian Company before passing eventually to the present Hughes-Scott Partnership. A quirky historical episode, Lake Nash endured a notorious cattle theft in 1917 when 800 head were stolen and two rustlers caught after a chase to Frew River. They got 5 years hard labour. These days, Lake Nash is all about large-scale modern pastoral practices. It has dozens of bores, extensive laneway systems for mustering, and even produces 10,000 bales of hay annually from its Mitchell grass plains to feed weaners and supply other stations. Uniquely, the station supports a local indigenous community, Alparulalam, on its eastern edge, demonstrating cooperation between pastoral and community interests. Lake Nash's achievement is maximising the Barkly's potential. It consistently turns off high volumes of quality cattle. When seasons are kind, the sight of tens of thousands of fat cattle on Lake Nash's green plains is something to behold, the very picture of Australia's rangeland abundance. Holding the bronze medal position is Alexandria Station in the Northern Territory with about 1,641,416 hectares or 16,116 square kilometres of land. Alexandria is the largest cattle station in the NT and was long regarded as the second largest station in the world until other properties expanded. This property is huge, roughly the size of Q8, and has been in continuous operation since the late 1870s. Amazingly, Alexandria has been owned by the North Australian Pastoral Company, NAPCO, since 1877, making it NAPCO's oldest and flagship station. The station runs about 55,000 head of cattle on average, predominantly a Brahman cross herd grazing the nutrient-rich Mitchell grass of the Barkly tableland. In good wet seasons, the open black soil plains produce such volume of grass that Alexandria actually harvests around 10,000 hay bales each year to support other NAPCO properties. Approximately 30,000 of those are breeding cows, making Alexandria one of the largest breeding operations in the country. The station's herd is a mix of Brahman, Sandigatruda, Charbray, Senepal and Wagyu cross cattle, reflecting a drive to produce hardy yet high-quality beef. Alexandria's history goes back to 1879 when it was acquired, unstocked, by John Costello. Costello overlanded 700 cattle to start the herd in 1879. By 1901, the station carried roughly 20,000 cattle, and that herd grew steadily. A shift in breeding in the 1980s saw Alexandria go from shorthorn to Brahman cattle to better handle tropical conditions. One fun fact, Alexandria is so large that it was often cited as being bigger than some countries. Indeed, it's larger than East Timor or Northern Ireland. It shares boundaries with several other big stations. For example, it abuts Brunette Downs to the west. The achievement of Alexandria Station is the seamless management of an operation of mind-boggling scale for nearly 150 years. It has maintained herd quality and land condition through cycles of drought and flood. Being part of NAPCO, Alexandria has also benefited from corporate-level research. It was a test bed for improvements in water infrastructure, rangeland monitoring, and even carbon farming initiatives. When one thinks of the classic Texas-sized cattle station, Alexandria fits the bill, and then some, with a legacy and output that secure its place among the world's premier pastoral holdings. The runner-up is Clifton Hills Station in South Australia, encompassing roughly 1,650,000 hectares or 16,500 square kilometres on the Birdsville track. This property is so large and remote that it's the biggest property along the entire length of the Birdsville track, stretching across stony desert plains and the lower Channel country near Lake Eyre. For perspective, Clifton Hills is about the size of Kuwait or Swaziland. It was long advertised as the second largest cattle station on Earth, just behind Anna Creek. The property's landscape is a mix of Gibber Pebble Plains, sand ridges and floodplains of the Diamantina and Warburton rivers, which periodically inundate about 1,500 square kilometres of the station, creating lush pastures. These floods are critical. They rejuvenate feed and allow Clifton Hills to sustain an estimated 18,000 head of cattle in good seasons. The station is licensed for up to 21,500 head, reflecting its vast forage capacity when conditions are right. Clifton Hills was established in 1876, and by the 1920s, it, combined with an adjacent lease Kanawana, spanned 28,300 square kilometres and ran 20,000 cattle. The modern era saw the property held for 60 years by one family until 2018, when it was sold for reportedly around $35 million. The current owners are Crown Point Pastoral Company, who added Clifton Hills to their growing cattle empire.
Clifton Hills operates with a relatively small crew given its size, historically around 8 to 10 staff, and uses road trains to send cattle south to market. Marie is the railhead or truck point. A notable moment in station history occurred in 1967. Clifton Hills was the starting point for the first ever road train cattle delivery down the Birdsville track. Prior to that, cattle had always been driven on the hoof. This signalled the start of the modern era of road transport in the region. Clifton Hills' achievement lies in adapting to extreme variability. In the 2000s, drought saw it nearly destocked, then floods would replenish it and the cycle continues. Despite being so remote, Birdville is 132 kilometres north, Innamincka 200 kilometres east, the station has embraced technology, satellite phones, telemetry on boars, and even organic certification for its beef. Standing on Clifton Hills, one truly grasps the scale of Australia's rangelands, nothing but open land to the horizon in every direction. As of today, Clifton Hills retains its silver medal status globally and nationally, second only to one.
Finally, Anna Creek Station in South Australia is the largest station in Australia and the world, covering a staggering 2,367,000 hectares, or 23,670 square kilometres. This single station is approximately the size of Belgium. To put it another way, Anna Creek is over 7 times the size of the biggest ranch in the United States, the King Ranch in Texas. It's hard to fathom. One property of 2.3 million hectares, all operated as a single cattle station. Anna Creek is located in South Australia's far north, with its homestead not far from Coober Pedy, the opal mining town. Established in 1863, originally on different land, it switched from sheep to cattle in the 1880s due to heavy losses to dingoes. The station's arid pastoral country consists of sand dunes, stony tablelands, and dry salt lakes, classic outback terrain where finding enough feed and water for cattle is the perpetual challenge. How many cattle can Anna Creek run? In a good season, up to about 16,500 head of cattle can be carried on its vast expanses. During droughts, that number drops dramatically. In 2007, only 1,500 head were on Anna Creek due to drought. The station traditionally raises Santa Gertruda's cattle, a breed suited to hot and dry climates. Anna Creek's modern operations rely on extensive bore water from the Great Artesian Basin to supply dozens of watering points for stock. For decades, Anna Creek was the crown jewel of S. Kidman & Co., the legendary cattle empire of Sir Sidney Kidman. In 2016, Kidman & Co. sold Anna Creek to Williams Cattle Company, a South Australian family outfit, as part of a high-profile sale that kept the station under local ownership. The Williams family also acquired the adjacent Peak Out Station, and together, Anna Creek and the Peak make up the full 2.367 million hectares. Managing Anna Creek is an exercise in logistics. Stock camps moving cattle across distances so great it's like roving across a country. Light aircraft used to muster and check waters, and a tiny crew of stockmen and station hands living at outstations weeks at a time. The nearest community, William Creek, is literally surrounded by Anna Creek Station and is essentially a service point for it. Among Anna Creek's notable achievements, aside from sheer size, is its resilience. It has endured some of the worst droughts on record, including completely destocking in the 2000s and then rebuilding the herd when rains returned. It also coexists with other land users. The world's largest rocket testing range, Woomera, borders it to the west, and travellers pass through en route to Lake Eyre. Yet it continues to be a working cattle property, shipping thousands of beef cattle to market from some of the driest country in Australia. In every sense, Anna Creek is the big one. It exemplifies the Australian Outback Station, vast, rugged, and operated by hardy people with an intimate knowledge of land and livestock. Being the largest, it carries the legend that, if you ride out from Anna Creek in any direction, you'll likely die of old age before you reach the fence. A playful exaggeration, but not by much. As the world's largest working cattle station, Anna Creek Station is a fitting capstone to our list, a station so immense that its story is the story of Australian pastoralism itself, writ large across the sunburnt Mand.
Each of these 20 stations has its own character and story, but they all share a common thread, unimaginable scale and a pioneering spirit. They're a reminder that Australia's heart still harbours these sprawling, productive kingdoms of the Outback where every sentence of history is etched in dust and hoofprints across the never-ending plains.